Great, thanks.
And I'll do a quick introduction. I'm Sabine Rogers. I'm the Strategic Partnership Coordinator for Virginia Sea Grant. Thank you all for your interest in the Knauss Fellowship. And I'll introduce Dr. Troy Hartley. He's the Director of Virginia Sea Grant. And yeah, you can do the rest of your introduction.
No, that's perfect. And yeah, thank you so much again for your interest in Knauss. And Virginia Sea Grant has the most number of Knauss alumni in the national network of Sea Grant programs. And it's a program that we feel very strongly about. I think it's an amazing opportunity, and I'm excited to push out to folks and to have discussions like these to help prepare students to compete well. I'm not going to really do a formal presentation about the Knauss application process. You guys have probably seen the NOFO and the material you need to prepare. I kind of want to make sure we're here for questions. But I think the overarching themes that I would have and would encourage you to think about when you look at the Knauss proposal is pay close attention to the evaluation criteria and the weighting, and think about every element of your application. A letter of recommendation from somebody, the statement, all your different statements you need to have in the mix. That think of them as all the players on your board, and they don't do a lot of duplicative things with those pieces. Don't pick a reference that's going to say the exact same thing as your academic advisor, right? Have the messages speaking to the criteria, and use every opportunity you have to make sure you're covering all those criteria with all your pieces of the proposal. I didn't say that very articulately. What I really mean is making sure you feel you've got that criteria covered, because there's a real rigid point system to that, and there's going to be a board, a panel with probably about a dozen people on it, and they're going to be looking at 120 some odd application. This is national. This is once you get to the national level. We can only send up 6 from each individual state, so there's an internal process we end up going through. But for those 6 that go up, that there's 120 applications being reviewed by 12 plus kind of panelists, and they're pretty fatigued as they're going through all those. It's a 3 or 4 day process, and they're scoring, and they're using those numeric scores. And the difference sometimes between, you might have 50 that get ultimately the Knauss. The difference between the 50th slot and the 75th slot is 0.15 or something, or 0.5. It's not big. It's a competitive process. And so thinking about how you're meeting the evaluation criteria is probably my number one recommendation. And the other part of that story that you're trying to tell is that everybody has a unique story, and trying to find it and telling it in this proposal becomes important. But and that means things like when you're thinking about what motivates you, what got you to where you are, and why you want something like Knauss, appreciate that panel is going to read 125 applications, and 100 of them are going to say, well, every summer I went to the beach for my summer vacation with my whole family, and we'd walk the beach and find shells, or we'd see wildlife, or those are very common stories. That's not what's going to separate you from everybody else. It's what's your unique story. And usually those unique stories are going to be something that'll help you point to, this is how I've grown, and this is why I care about what I care about. why I care about this field. And this is why I care about learning about the policy process that's connected to this field. You don't have to be a policy expert. What you have to be is able to articulate, this is what being in DC and learning what that science policy interface world is about would do for me, and how I grow from it, how it might get me to a future job I might want, how I might inform my future research, or inform me about where in the policy world I may want to be in my career. They're going to be looking for those sort of growth, that reflection on where you've been and where you want to go, and how you articulate that in the proposal material. And let's see.
While he looks through that, I'm going to add, so that first piece with respect to all the different parts of the application, use that, your story, your lived experience, weave that through all of those pieces. So when you have your advisor writing you a letter of recommendation, or that sort of outside person outside of academia writing you a letter of recommendation, make sure they're not being duplicative about the points that they're touching on, as Troy noted, and that sort of weaving all of that lived experience, your personal unique lived experience, through all of those pieces will also be helpful in helping you stand out amongst that bigger crowd.
It is fine and appropriate to coach the people who are writing references for you, to say, hey, here, this is what, here's what they're asking of you. This is what I'm putting in my other parts of my application. This is the area that another reference is talking about. These are the things that I think would be most valuable for you to address in your recommendation. That's perfectly appropriate. So in the first evaluation criteria, right, which 75 points, is relevant experience related to diversity of education, right? They want to see that you've experienced a number of different kinds of things and grown from those things, and you bring those together. Extracurricular activities. So somewhere on that CV, which is limited to two pages, you don't put every single publication you've ever had or every poster you've ever given. Be very selective and maybe highlight a couple of those, but then include something that's, these are my hobbies. These are things that are part of my life. They're an important part of my life. We've sometimes seen strong Knauss applications in the past that they have, I'm a statistician on one hand, and I'm a musician on the other. And you just show that that there's a lot to who people are, and those sort of diverse perspectives that can surprise people can help separate you from the crowd. And the only other comment I want to make before I want to open up the floor is when you're looking at some of the evaluation criteria, personal education and career development responses, and there's, give an icebreaker and a career path and objectives and career path experiences. They want to see, or it's strong to show growth and reflection on that growth. And it's fine to show I made a mistake. And it's fine to say, I made this mistake, but I learned these things about myself about from that, and now I'm doing this. So I've grown professionally, and I'm doing some different things because of something that a mistake I may have made. That's cool. It's the reflection on how'd you get your career path and objectives? Where'd your objectives come from, right? Why? What's underlying my career objectives? That's telling a deeper story. Questions you guys are burning to ask?
Oh, come on.
I can start. I'm curious how, this is a difficult question to ask. I have prior experience in policy. Is this something that I should continue to talk up, or do they prefer to really see science like how do I strike the balance, and should I be wary of going too much into policy experience that I have had?
Yeah, we're all at different points in our sort of exposure and experience with sort of science and policy, and there are strengths and limitations to all those places on that continuum. So the limitation or the challenge you're going to face is that you will have already learned a lot of some of the basic science policy interface kind of questions that you may learn from Knauss because of that past experience, but it means you then have to take it from where you're at and how you're going to grow from there. So what does Knauss bring you given your background? And why is it important to do Knauss, and how does it help you continue to learn and continue to grow? So it's not it's going to be reflected on your CV. You're not going to be able to kind of hide it. It's going to be better to acknowledge, I've gained a lot of policy experience already, but I appreciate there's so much more to learn. And particularly for me, it's in this area, right? Or this is something that even when I was doing that part of policy, I recognized I didn't have. That's why I'm coming back to school to do this, this, and this, so that I can then be in another position. So if they see that you understand your growth path and are articulating that, then I think that's fine wherever you are on that path. For those of you who don't have any policy experience, right? You're a little bit the strength and limitation of that position on that career path. The limitation is it's sometimes maybe hard to articulate fully what you're going to gain because you don't know, and that's okay. And you can even say that, but reflecting that appreciation for there's a reason I want to do this, and I'm passionate about it for this reason, and that's going to lead me to growing professionally in this kind of way. And it can even be about making choices. I mean, if you look at the alumni network that comes out of Knauss, for example, the percentages used to be about a third would stay in DC, a third would go back to school, and a third would end up in kind of state or local work. And there's a portion of that third that stay in DC that said, I went to DC just to learn what this is all about. I never thought I'd want to stay here. And then they get kind of bit by the federal policy bug, and they stay there. Others say, I went there, maybe I thought I was going to be in DC or be a federal scientist, but then I realized, no, what I want to really do is go back to school and go to my next degree or grow in that way and have that inform what I do. So going into a Knauss to learn and appreciate where your next career moves may be, and they're exploring options is fine to do as well. So that's a long-winded way of saying, don't be scared if you don't have the policy experience yet, and don't be scared if you do have it too. just recognize you need to understand where you are in that career path and articulate that.
Josephine has a question. She's in a library, so we appreciate that. Is it more valuable to share recent stories that demonstrate who I am now, or maybe a more impactful story from a while ago?
That's a good question, and my first reaction is thinking through all the elements of the application package and whether or not you can capture them both a little bit. I'm making an assumption, this may be wrong, but that earlier experience may have been a really kind of important fork in the road, a transitional period, or something, and that made a huge impact, and it's put me on the path I'm at now. That's a pretty big deal. You probably don't want to ignore that at all. But when it then comes to how does Knauss help you grow, then you're going to want to talk a little bit more about where you're at now and how it's going to inform where you go. So I don't think it has to be a one or the other, but and that gets back to thinking about all the pieces of the application across materials, right? The various prompts they're asking you about, what's an icebreaker versus a career objective. And there might be a place that a big major transformative experience fits into an icebreaker really well. And and then, but not somewhere else, right? And I will tell you that they've changed up the application process for Knauss over the last few years. So just the last couple cohorts that have applied will have experience with this application template. One of the things we do is we help enable, and I don't know if you've mentioned it yet, but
I haven't. So you're stealing my thunder.
Okay, I won't say that, but I will say that as you talk to others, maybe in your labs or in your program that have gone after Knauss, do appreciate that some from 4 or 5 years ago have used a different application template. But you want to drop your thunder?
Sure, I can. I've got about, at this point, I think there are 16 past and current Knauss that are interested in mentoring. So what that means is they would be willing to look over your application materials prior to your submission to Virginia Sea Grant. After that point, there aren't any changes that can be made. So I'm going to drop my email address in the chat, or I can also send you guys all my email after this, because I have everybody's information, but I'll drop it in here anyway. And if you have an interest in being paired with one of our past Knauss, please reach out to me. I might have you send me just some basic information about yourself so we can make a good pairing. We have a pretty diverse crew that has been excited about talking to applicants, potential Knauss. So yeah, just shoot me an email and we'll go from there. I'll make introductions, and then we're kind of out of the picture for that, and it's just you and the Knauss that you get paired with that get to continue the conversation.
And they can also, kind of coach and guide you a little bit on, so, well, what was your experience like? What did you really learn that you didn't expect to learn? So you can start to get at understanding a little bit of where will the growth opportunities be for you in a Knauss context, and what is exciting about that for you. So that's certainly something that a alumni can give you.
Okay, I have a question, and I don't know. Oh, sorry, I didn't know I was supposed to raise my hand. I don't know how relevant it is to other students and where they're at, with their programs, but I'm planning to graduate at the end of the summer, and I noticed in the career statement, they want you to kind of talk about what you're going to be doing in between now and the start date. Do you have any ideas, I guess, on what previous fellows have done? I know that there was one about like working in your lab, doing part-time, just as long as you're staying involved in research. But I'm just wondering if you have any guidance on like how concrete some of our ideas should be for that, or just what your advice is in general.
Yeah, no, that's a good question, and it reflects. So Knauss starts at the weirdest time in the whole world, right? February 1, and the date was set by Congress because, right, a dozen of these Knauss are on the Hill, and another 50 or so are in administrative, executive branch positions. And that's when the new Congress starts. So that's the origin of that. But they appreciate that this is totally different than any academic cycle. And so anyone who kind of graduates in December, that timing might be good. But then Knauss also worries about, or is thinking about, I mean, NOAA is thinking about, we don't want Knauss to be something that prevents you from graduating. And it's a little tight if you're getting, December and then you're going to start in February. If something happens and you got to go back and do another analysis, or your committee says something and all of a sudden you're off by a semester, that's still okay. You can still do Knauss if you haven't graduated, but most of the me, in our case, in Virginia, is going to be on you when they're in that semester. Hey, how's it going? Did you finish yet? Hey, how's it going? You finished yet? Right? Everybody worse than your dad, because we don't want Knauss to prevent somebody from graduating. So they're on that side. And then if you graduate in May and you've got some time before Knauss starts, they just want to see that you've got a plan and you're not kind of sitting there waiting and are going to be, you haven't thought through a little bit what you're going to do between the time you end and the time Knauss starts. Not really, they're not going to dive deep into, oh, you're doing that and that's more valuable than doing this. They're not going to do that so much. They just want to see that you've been thinking through that. And people have done a lot of different things, from staying in the lab, staying on board, working more with their advisor, to interning somewhere for a short period of time, to some programs. We haven't done this, but some programs, might onboard some folks in a Sea Grant model so that they get exposed to what Sea Grant is. I don't know how critical that is to the host office, but the applicants, the NOAA National Sea Grant Office, they like, in the big picture, having Knauss appreciate what Sea Grant is, because ultimately they will be professionals in the field, and if they know Sea Grant, then that helps Sea Grant in the long run. We do a lot of outreach to our Knauss once they're there, and we come up to DC periodically and take people out to dinner and see how it's going, and connect you to alumni, and kind of provide peer mentoring and coaching opportunities and some professional development opportunities. So Virginia Sea Grant stays very connected to the Knauss once they're in the slot. So there's a good chance you know what Sea Grant is by doing Knauss. But yeah, so I think it's not as much what you do, it's just making sure that there's a clear path, okay, and you're not hanging out. Jem?
Hi, Troy and Sabine. My question is more specific to one of the requirements where they want us to provide relevant courses to Knauss. So I wanted to clarify whether those things are just academic, like things that we actually took on campus, or could that include training? So let's say, for example, I enrolled in a different training in UVA, or things that are not like graded. does that count for a relevant course?
Yes, I believe it does. I'll have to, we'll double check to the very specifics of that provision in the application. It's not ringing a bell with me, but the sense of being able to illustrate some variability and diversity in perspectives, I think some of those other types of non-traditional courses do that. I've been trained, I've had a communication at a conflict resolution training course workshop, something that may not be a formal course in your degree, but is certainly preparing you and prepares you for the kind of experiences you can have in DC.
Okay, thank you.
And Jim, do you know off the top of your head where that provision is in the application process? I can take
it. Yeah, when I looked at, let me see. It was after career path experience. Let me just double check what specific thing that was.
Oh, there we go. Relevant coursework and future year plans.
Yeah, and then there's one that says like relevant to Knauss. So, I mean, I understand the part about relevant coursework, but then there's this bit where it talks about courses that are relevant to Knauss. And I've spoken to one of my friends who's a current fellow, and he said that when you're in the program, you have that opportunity to enroll in different courses that would help you with your position as a fellow. But I was just curious about like that listing, like when you list things that are related to Knauss, if you could put in non-academic traditional courses.
Yeah, I think that would actually be a good thing. And it feeds a little bit back to what I was saying earlier about thinking through all of the pieces of the application process and how they can touch all of the elements of the evaluation criteria. And there was a component of what's the diversity of my educational experience. And so if you can capture an example of that over here in my list of courses, as well as over, and here too, then you're just making sure you're getting that covered, the evaluation criteria, and showing the diversity of types of classes and types of coursework and learning experiences is an illustration of diversity of education.
I have a question. So to give some preface to this question, I have talked to someone who is also a current Knauss fellow, and also just some advisors in my college. I also brought this up to Sabine in an earlier meeting her and I had, and it was, how does the Knauss fellowship or application process feel about involvement in civic issues that may be deemed nonpartisan?
Yeah. That's fine. That's good. It's not a bad thing. I think the thing you will want to bring with that is sort of a reflection on, this is the role we were playing in a policy process, and we have a really important role. This voice is very important to be heard, and it doesn't mean that maybe that evidence and science. I'm going to discount that. Rather, it's that and the science and is sort of the neutral, honest broker, like in the decision-making process. It's what informs the process, and I want to be coming into Knauss to understand and to how science and information does inform a process, but recognizing that there are many stakeholders and many voices in a decision-making process. And science isn't the only one. And I worked for and advanced one of those stakeholder perspectives. And maybe learned that, see, I'm thinking out loud with you a little bit here. If you can reflect on that experience and think about, and this is how we were influential, and this is when we were not influential. And well, what is science? How does science play out in that way? It would reflect that you are, I'm sorry, I'm using the same word twice, right? In the same sentence. It would reflect that you were reflective, that you're thinking about what that experience brought to the table and how you grew from it, and how it would bring to the table of Knauss and inform your experience in Knauss as well. So it's not a bad thing. I think it's just, you got to be upfront and open and honest about, I was representing a stakeholder interest that I care a lot about, and I still care about it, fine. And they have a voice, and that's important. And this is the process, the political process, and then go from there. It's been interesting, and just thinking about that question and what it's meant in the Knauss context before. I think it's probably fair to recognize that the majority of applicants in Knauss and host offices are usually advancing coastal, marine, environmental related interests, and thus tend to be more on the left of the political spectrum than the right. There has been, years ago, there was pushback from the right, the Republicans on the Hill, saying, we're not getting any Knauss in our offices. They're all going to Democratic offices as host offices. And Sea had to step in a little bit. The national office stepped in and said, look, legislative folks, it's, you can gain a lot, grow a lot professionally if you're in a Republican office, even if you don't believe in their policies, to understand how science works in that context. And then we've seen folks who have elected to go to a Republican host office on the Hill, and then walk away saying, wow, I learned a lot, and I was surprised a lot, and by where their position come from and the role and importance of science, and that they do take it seriously, and that it was a great experience. So, and it is a tougher time. There is more partisanship at play in DC generally right now. So I think I guess I say that to have you reflect on application material, to be articulating independent of partisan issues. We're here because we think that evidence-based information and rigorous analysis of facts and understanding is going to help us make a more informed decision, and that's better for society. And stay clear of partisan points in your materials. Does that make sense?
Yes, that answered it perfectly. Thank you.
Should any of our interest in executive versus legislative be sort of included, or maybe not explicit? Like, should we factor that in at all at this point, or is that only later on? Is it useful to sort of allude to what we're interested in?
I think it's actually recommended that you don't for the initial portion. I don't have it right in front of me right now. Sorry, we sort of switched where we were doing this, so we're in we're on William Mary's main campus in a different office. I don't have like my 5 screens up, but I will confirm that and can send that out, and I'll send out confirmations for all of the questions that we weren't able to fully answer.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's right. That's right. To some degree, those elements may come out anyway if you're talking about the areas that you're most interested in, but that is a separate point. If anything, actually, and I think we've seen this. I mean, this is getting ahead of the process, but the interviews that happen at the state level with us in our office, and then applications that would go forward. It's been years since I've seen one like this, but if someone came in, I am interested in marine turtle conservation in the Indian Ocean, and I only want to work and be in a host office in NOAA or the State Department that's working on marine turtle conservation in the Indian Ocean. And they were so narrow in their perspective, then that was not reviewed particularly well. The interest is really showing someone who has this kind of enthusiasm and appreciation and really desire to learn more about how does this science and engineering and technologies and new knowledge research start to play itself out in a policy and management context, and that's the core of what we're trying to grow from and learn, both to inform my own future career opportunities or my own growth, but also to be in that world and make a difference in the world there. If they start from that, then where the hosts are, there could be a lot of choices, a lot of host choices. And it's not uncommon at all that folks go up and during the placement process, and when you start looking for fit, and there'll be more host offices than Knauss available, so everyone can get placed if they want. A lot of people get surprised by what their top choice was, because, well, I wasn't even thinking about that content area, but boy, I really like the people and I like what the opportunity was that they put on the table and how I could grow from that. So, it's getting, don't wed yourself too early to a very specific host or a specific content area.
I'll ask another question. The icebreaker sentence that's asking you to describe yourself, I mean, I know it's supposed to be creative and outside the box. Do you have any thoughts on what's worked well in the past?
This is certainly one of the newer elements of the application process. So talking to some more recent Knauss would be probably the best advice you'd get on that. But as a Sea Grant director who'd be looking at applications and talking, thinking through the first group that go through, my gut is thinking more about encouraging you to be more genuine and about yourself than thinking through that there's somehow a strategic right answer to an icebreaker, because I don't think there is. I think the difference will become, if an icebreaker is disingenuous, you're going to be able to tell that. But if an icebreaker is genuine, then it's real, it's from you. And that's why I was earlier noting that, maybe something like we don't all have them. It's not, and it's fine not to, some sort of transformative experience that pivoted you into this world from some other world, that might make an interesting kind of idea to think about as part of an icebreaker, because it's uniquely you and it's genuine. And I've never developed an icebreaker sentence myself first, but if I was going to coach someone to do it, I might say, start there and then see what it looks like. Don't start with, oh, this is going to be some totally outside the box thing that no one's ever heard of before. And so I'm going to, write it in Latin, or I don't know, but so it's not, don't worry about it being out of the box yet. Start from what's in your heart.
So if we write in Latin, are we going to get points taken off?
I won't be able to read it.
I don't think Google Translate does a very good job with Latin either, Chad. What you're hearing a lot of, though, I hope, is that unique you, right? It's about you. It's not about trying to fit into some certain box that you think is going to make you more successful in this process. It's bringing yourself to the table. And as Troy noted, that genuine piece. People can tell when you're being genuine and when you're presenting yourself and what you're passionate about and what you're interested in. That'll come across in your application package if you take that path.
And I think that reflects a little bit about what Knauss is or any postgraduate fellowship. It's this transition, right, from school to a professional work environment. And in school, it feels it's all judgmental and structured, and there's a right answer to something, and you got to show it in a very certain way, and you're going to be graded on that. There really isn't that type of formula here, and appreciate that. Then drafting this type of application is you might feel a little vulnerable. You might feel like you just pushed yourself a little bit outside your comfort zone. But that's probably the right place to be. So have people, and that's a good thing to share, right? You can develop some of these things and share them with others and have them take a look at it and give you feedback and talk to the alumni in the Knauss programs that we can connect you to and see what they think of a icebreaker example. Go from there. I will say this, that just because you've expressed and seen interest, something in this Knauss application is making you excited about it. And that already makes you pretty awesome. And so I think, identify what's made it so exciting for you, and think about that as you're pulling your stuff together. Certainly send in questions you have later too. This is probably a very atypical webinar on a funding source, but it's more about a conversation and about getting you thinking about how you want to put this application together.
I think that makes it very relevant for this, though, because everything that you have in front of you, the documents that you've gotten from our website, it's all very structured, right? This is the criteria. This is what you have to speak to. Troy has given you a sort of a different perspective, and I think a really good one, a better perspective on, yeah, that's fine. You've got to meet this criteria, but don't let that be what guides your writing. Make it that genuine piece is huge. It really will set you apart. And we've seen that time after time with our applicants. They're so unique and they're so different, and they all bring something different to the table that is applicable to Knauss. And it's finding that and putting that on paper, it'll meet the criteria when you go to that place that is a little more vulnerable.
Well, and that's the key point, right? Those are the things that will hit those criteria points, to be able to tell that unique story.
So I guess my suggestion is don't overthink the criteria so much. Start with your story. And as you develop that, and as you develop your application, you talk to other people, you talk to Knauss fellows, past Knauss fellows, then take the time to make sure that you're hitting all the points. But I think you'll find that that's what gets you there.
Yeah, when you map back to the criteria, if you start from that strategy, I think you'll find you'll hit everything. And then that's where you want to make sure that, like we were saying before, use each of the unique pieces to make sure that you have covered that criteria. It does map back onto it.
Yeah.
And you don't have to duplicate content.
Well, and it's also recognizing too, right? I mean, the one thing is the word count is limited in a lot of these places. So making sure you avoid duplication and really show the depth and breadth of yourself and what you bring to the table using all the words that they allow you to use. And
a goofy story about that, do check the word count and check the word. This is crazy, but check the word count after you converted it to a PDF. We had a few years back, someone who wrote it up in Word, was right on the word number, converted it to PDF, and some of the words were hyphenated, and they counted it differently in Word than they did in PDF. So National came back to try to say, well, we got to cut these like 2 last sentences from this particular person's statement because the word count is they're over the word count. And we went back and had to fight a little to get that fully. They did look at it, ultimately the whole thing, but word count is something that they look for. So make sure you're hitting that.
We've got about 6 more minutes scheduled. We're willing to go over, but at least 6 more minutes for any of you that have to hop off at 4 that have additional questions.
And we can give you your 6 minutes back too. You don't have to.
I have a logistics question and then I think I'm done. In terms of the elevation from Virginia Sea Grant to the National, there was a note on the application that said that some states choose to notify the students and some don't. Is Virginia a state that lets the students know if they move past the Virginia stage? Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Another logistic question kind of going off of that I may have just forgotten is, for everyone applying to the Virginia Sea Grant Knauss application, the interview aspect with y'all, is that prior to you selecting your 6 or is that after you selecting your 6?
Prior.
Okay.
Sorry, Natalie, are you referencing the notification question?
We have a text.
Yes, correct. Yes, correct. Sorry.
Yes, I'm sorry. I nodded. I guess I have to be sensitive to those of you who are on a phone or something. Sorry about that. Yes, Virginia Sea Grant will notify students at all stages, both when we make our selection, if there are more than 6 applicants, or we just have done our due diligence, we will let everyone know the outcome. And then when it goes up to DC, usually it's May or June before they will be announcing, and they announce first to the states, and then we will notify you then as well. Well, again, thank you so much for your interest in this program. We also have a similar state version of Knauss called the Commonwealth Fellows, which is a in state agencies in Richmond. It's a different place to be thinking about state policy, which I mean, my own career path, I lived and worked in DC for several years, a couple points in my life, and have worked at both the state and local and federal level. And there are times when I actually feel like I have a bigger impact on a state level than I've had on a federal level. So it's a different place, and but a lot of the issues are really very, very similar to in terms of applications of science and information to make policy.
And that's a similar application to the Knauss, and it will be released, I think we decided, sort of early March. So we send that out in our funding opportunity newsletter as well. If you're in our contact management system, you'll get that. If you receive this through that notification or through your advisor, you'll probably see that as well. But if that's something of interest to you, just to let you know, beginning of March.